we'll have to
Swear. We'll have to swear.
stuff everyone on Facebook.
Yeah. They don't deserve it.
They're done.
They don't deserve our love.
No, they do not, Jake.
That is a song I just made up, Greg.
I love it. It's refreshing. It's a fresh sound, I will say.
Yep.
All right. Well, hello everyone. It's lovely to be back. We're going to get straight into it because that's what we do here on the Pouch the Podcast. We get straight into things, and here we go. Now, you can't hear the music anymore, can you?
No.
You can't hear the music anymore. It's all just fallen to rubbish. I'm going to press it anyway. So there we go, because I can hear it. That's the most important thing. And the listeners can hear it. That's the other most important thing.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of demanding to open borders.
Yeah, it works.
Why not? Hello.
I read it out loud.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of a demand to open borders. Oh, a demanding open borders to resume tourism.
Take out A.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to the... Thank you. He's deleting it now. Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of demanding open borders to resume tourism that has minimal impact on tourism because people are afraid of spreading the pandemic. I didn't practice this. It's not good. You do it. Go.
Look,
it's season 3. You do it. You go.
All right. Hello and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of demanding open borders to resume tourism that has a minimal impact on tourism because people are afraid of the spreading pandemic due to the open borders that aims to take a not so serious look at the week in Australian news and politics. I'm Jake. I'm Jake. Wow, holidays during a pandemic are super awesome, farr-wharton.
And I'm Greg. You know she's a keeper when she puts a love heart on your meat pie savage. On today's episode, we talk problematic pandemics, titillating tennis, elating elections, and so very much more. And Jake, while we are as snug as a bug in this proverbial rug, I want to know, A, who's running the show, and B, why everyone's making a fuss about the cost of rats. Farmers have been complaining about a surplus of rats for years.
Yeah, it's a different rat. It's a different rat, Greg. But spoiler alert: the reason that people are upset about the cost of rats is these rat test manufacturers. They've been gold plating them. You remember, like we were hearing about price increases for electricity going up for years, and it was blamed on a so-called gold plating of the network. Well, these manufacturers of rat tests, they've been gold plating their rat tests. I've heard of some that have a C, a T, and an E line on there. Like they're just going overboard, trying to put too many letters of the alphabet on that little thing. It's just, guys, just go with the C and the T.
It's a bit like when Apple released their first Apple Watch.
Yeah,
they released this limited edition gold thingamabob, and it was like $35,000 or something for this watch.
I remember that. Yeah.
So now we've got these limited edition rats.
Yeah, they're gold plated, Greg.
You can't.
Hey, if you're actually paying for gold, that's fine. But if you're not, I've heard of and I've seen people essentially saying, "I need to get hold of a rat test. I will pay literally whatever you've got or whatever you want if I can have your rat test." It's crazy.
Now, Jake, you've just committed the cardinal sin, right? You called them rat tests, right? Which is not correct.
It upsets me too because it's rapid antigen, which would be AG.
That's right.
Normally. So I'm just getting on board with everybody else's nomenclature.
Well, that's the thing, right? And so my wife, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention this because she's very passionate about this. She was nearly going to write a letter to Scott Morrison about it.
Yep.
But she wanted to write a letter to someone who would get something done.
Hey.
And she wanted to call them RAP tests for rapid tests. So why didn't we go with RAP rather than RAT? Because everyone wants to say RAT test, but you can't say it because otherwise it'd be rapid antigen test.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing, Greg, that upsets me because people do say rat test and rapid antigen test. It already has test in it. So if you're saying rat test, it's a redundant test.
That's right.
The test is
redundant.
So
why didn't we just go with RAP test for rapid test?
Look, if we were going strictly on what science wanted, it would have been a RAG test, rapid antigen. Because normally when you're doing a antigen test, It's
Well, I do them all the time, Jake. I'm doing one right now.
the second part of the test is the AG or antigen. So it would have been it would have been a CAG test, so COVID antigen test, C, and then AG. That's what it should have been. It should have been a CAG test.
Well,
it's not a CAG test.
I'm happy. Yeah, CAG test. Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue though, does it?
Well, neither does PCR.
It does more for the back of the throat than it does for the tongue. In the spirit
Have
of
you had a
Hang on.
sorry,
In the spirit of reconciliation and recognition, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're podcasting today, and we recognise the continuing connection to land, water, and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. No, I haven't had a rat.
Haven't had a rat?
No, I can't get them. They're not around. And I said to the chemist person the other day, the person who works at the chemist.
Pharmacist, yep.
Well, I don't know if they're all pharmacists, are they?
True. No, they're not. They might be a pharmacist assistant. They might just be a cashier.
Let's go with the pharmacist assistant. I said to them, I don't. Do you have rats? And she said, no. I said, I don't actually want one. I just want to see one. I just want to go. I just want to know that if I could get one, I could get one. You know, like it's a bit like a PlayStation 5 or something. If I don't want one, I just want to know that I could potentially get one. It's like a limited edition basketball card or something. I don't know. It
is. You'd frame it. You know, the day after I had a funny experience, and I don't know if this is just funny to me, but my daughter laughed when it happened. So the day after New Year's Day, so the second of January. I decided, great time to get a booster shot. So I organised to go and get my booster shot, and I got it at a pharmacy because I really wanted to get Moderna, and you can only get Pfizer in the state-run clinic. So I went into a pharmacy, and there were maybe 30 signs up. No rat tests available, no rapid antigen tests available. And while I was standing there waiting to be served by the person to let them know that I was here for the vaccine, the person at the cashier would have taken maybe 4 or 5 calls. No, I'm sorry, we don't have any rat tests. No, I'm sorry, we don't have any rat tests. No, I'm sorry, don't. Anyway, so I got up to the front of the queue, and there is this, there is this big sign at the side of the cashier that says, "We have no rat tests available. Please don't ask." So I said, "Oh, hi, just wondering if you have any rat tests." No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm here for my vaccine.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I do it all the time. I went to a camera shop today, and he was like, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, do you sell any cameras?" Anyway, it's great. It's great. It's great getting older. You just, rip out these dad jokes.
Dad jokes everywhere, yep.
Okay, well, speaking of rats, Jake, which is it seems to be a bit of a case, right? We've got a bit of a story here about how many people actually believe that rats should be free, that they should be government sponsored rather than privately sponsored. So talk us through what's happening here.
Yeah, well, so 72% of Australians believe that rapid antigen tests should be completely free or supplied by the government. And a lot of this is sound. The PCR tests, which are ostensibly, let me just do some back of the envelope calculations, but in my brain, I'm going to say 800 times more expensive than a rat test is, and they are. In the most part, they are covered by Medicare or by the state government performing the test. So PCR tests are free, right? But they cost an astronomical amount to perform. There's economies of scale, etc. But in the case of a pandemic, you want to be performing them in small lots so that you can find out exactly where the RNA was amplified from, etc.
And that's not to mention staff and all the buildings that they've got to hire out, all the makeshift things that the tents that they've got to put up, all that sort of stuff.
Testing facilities, all that sort of stuff, and the nurses that they're taking off the front line in order to stick swabs down 3-month-old babies.
Good call.
Noses, yeah. So look, there are plenty of arguments to say that. So PCR testing is the gold standard, right? The rapid antigen testing has a false positive rate. It's not especially high, but there is one there, which means essentially that you could not have COVID, but you return a positive test.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's not a false negative, which means that you showed up as negative, but you're actually positive.
Right.
But So while PCR tests are the gold standard, and it does enable you to do things like phenotyping to understand exactly what strain, where it comes from, i.e., did you get it from Bob's auntie's neighbour, or did you get it from the coffee shop down the road because it's the same strain,
or worse, a tourist.
Exactly. Those
bought some
darn
of those
COVID tourists.
That's right. They've bought in that strain that's going to kill us all. And
oh yeah, no, sorry, I was referring to New South Welshmen who have come to Queensland in order to spread their COVID.
All right, we're all Australians now, Jake, except for Western Australia.
Except for Western Australia,
forgotten about them. Yeah.
But yeah, so the nature of this is the gold standard test right now is ostensibly free for Australians. We pay through our taxes, but there's no out of pocket per se cost rather. And you take RAT tests, or the rapid antigen tests, and they do have an expense behind them. They're paid for by the citizen in most cases. And you might need to take several over the course of a week if you are symptomatic of something.
Right.
And of course, you're having to provide those positive results back to the state government so that they can track positive case numbers, etc. So, there is a bit of an onus on the individual, not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of reporting and being put under health orders.
Yeah.
So there has been a reasonably strong response from Australian respondents on a survey done by the Australia Institute. It found that, as I said, 72% of respondents believes that the federal government should be providing rapid antigen tests free to everyone, including 2/3 of coalition voters. Of course, the coalition, who's in power right now, the Prime Minister and the Health Minister have both said there is currently no free lunches here. There are no free rat tests. And don't try to eat the rat tests. Also, don't try to use a rat.
Well, why not? If it tries to eat you, you don't have COVID.
If you do, yeah, exactly. It's exactly like World War Z. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. Now, the government did come out and say that they're going to have a stockpile of free rats. For concession card holders, I believe. Yep. On top of that, there's significant rumours, particularly for New South Wales and Victoria, in that this was in the news this morning, that they're going to be giving out rats, 2 per school child and a couple per teacher as well, with the idea being that all kids will have to be tested before they come back to school in the coming weeks, and if they're positive, obviously they don't come to school. If they're negative, then they can come to school. There's all sorts of rumors.
Did I read correctly that there's 2 tests per week that they would need to do?
I think so. And it was something like they needed 24 million tests for this. I had the maths all there ready to go. But yeah, it was 24 million tests just for the kids, and there was some other phenomenal amount for the teachers, all that sort of stuff. So I can't remember whether it was per week or whether it was just for the start of school. But yeah, it's possible that it's per week. Yep. Yeah, it's pretty full on. That's a lot. So that's a lot that they're stockpiled. Yeah. So I'm glad we didn't go out, because we were going to go out and buy some online. It was like $300 for a pack of 20, I think, because we've got 5 in our household, 5 people, and so we wanted to have 2 per person. So we were getting 10, so we thought we may as well get 20 or whatever. And it was going to be about $300. So I'm glad we didn't, because apparently, we're going to get some for free anyway, so that'll be good. And apparently there's big stockpiles coming in at the moment to be able to reduce that price down, because it's been huge. It peaked at like $60, and now it's back down to about an average just over $10 per rat, particularly in those packs. So
the great issue at the moment is that the lack of supply is encouraging the spread of the virus. Now, I'm sure that that's a big claim, but that it's a claim being made by many epidemiologists, because the reality is this rapid antigen test takes 15 minutes, and you can do it in the comfort of your own home. A PCR test, you got to wait as long as it takes for you to get to the front of that line, and then maybe 48, 72, 36, or more hours to get the actual result. And during that time, quite often people are moving about. They're moving around. if we had if our federal government had organised supply before the pandemic, before the borders opened, then there would be more people who are being able to be tested, who are being able to see that they are positive, and who are making the informed decision then to stay at home. But right now, like I've been to maybe 30 odd chemists, 30 odd supermarkets. Not a single one of them has any spare. I've been there at 7 a.m. when they opened their doors. I've been there at 2 p.m. when they said they were getting a delivery. There are no rapid antigen tests to spare, and I'm not unwell, but there are plenty of people who have a cough. I heard a story about a woman earlier this morning who was sick over the weekend, but were encouraged not to go and wait in line for a PCR test, and was unable to get a hold of a rapid antigen test. So they're back at work today.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because like I don't know whether the PCR places are closing down or what's happening with all of them. Maybe they're just fewer now than because of the rats. But yeah, look, it was so bizarre because we went camping for a week. So we were sort of off the grid, I guess, a little bit, like not too crazy, but we weren't I wasn't sort of checking the news every day and all that sort of stuff. We came back to Sydney after being down the south coast for a week. Came back and it was like the whole world had changed. All of a sudden, everyone was just talking about rats, and the news and the shopping centres were all empty again. We were just like, what happened? It felt like this sort of third wave that wasn't being talked about as a third wave, And I went into the city today and it's just dead. Like no one is in the city. No one's there. No one was in the cafes. No one was in the shopping centres. It was just eerily dead. It was just eerily quiet, I should say. And I said to Rach, my wife Rachel, I said, this is pretty full on because these people now have to pay their staff or let them go. They're not getting government support. There's no lockdown, and they're not making any money. This is the hardest wave. Like, this is the most difficult wave to be riding because there's just no government support. So people can't get the rats to get to work. People are being told to stay home from work. We're having over 100,000 at one stage there. Literally a few days ago, we were having over 100,000 cases a day. All those people couldn't go to work. And so, there's this huge impact on the economy, on tourism. Usually the city's buzzing at this time of year because they have the Sydney Festival. And we just felt like it's this self-imposed third lockdown for Sydney anyway. I don't know whether you can...
Oh, no. Look, it's everywhere. We've been through the city. We've been through the Gold Coast. In my home state of Queensland, there's bugger all people, and it's because people don't want COVID, frankly, and they don't know who has it because we don't have adequate testing occurring in order to show who is positive and thus who needs to be at home. So those who are out could very well be out and walking around and transmitting COVID.
That's right. And you know what? Like there are some people, Jake, who are very casual about the whole thing, and that would be the anti-vaxxers. They're very casual about the whole thing. They don't really mind about what's going on. It's as far as they're concerned. It's just
masterful segue.
It's just a little sniffle to them. It's just a little sniffle, nothing to worry about. A
bit of a spicy flu.
Yeah, especially if you're one of the 50 people who are losing their lives every day in Australia. Nothing to worry about there at all. So Deputy Barnaby Joyce has come out this week and said that we've got anti-vaxxer MPs, but what can you do? He said that there's nothing the federal government can do to silence anti-vaxxers in its ranks, and this comes on the back of deporting Novack Djokovic, who we'll talk about in a second. Good times. For fear he would encourage people to shun the COVID-19 vaccine. Senior ministers on Monday faced accusations of hypocrisy for their hard line against Mr. Djokovic, while government MPs such as George Christensen and Senator Alex Antic continued to spread anti-vaccination messages. We've got anti-vaxxers, certainly, but they're not from overseas, Mr. Joyce told the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. What can we do? As much as Immigration Minister Alex Hawke would like, he can't send any of our politicians to Serbia. It's classy. Mr. Joyce, the Nationals leader, and also Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, said he had counselled Mr. Christensen about his remarks, knowing full well that he's entitled to make them. He also said comments by anti-vaxxer MPs mattered less because they don't have the profile of Djokovic. I think he takes it up about 15 stories. Health Minister Greg Hunt told the ABC the government had made it clear we disagree with anybody, anywhere, with an anti-vaccination sentiment. Yes, I kind of get what he was talking about there, and the fact that, you can't, we've got these rules for people who do come in. It was funny. It felt like the government were trying to actually get rid of Djokovic, and I was saying to Rachel, I was saying, I don't, sorry, Jake, but when we don't do the podcast for a while, she's the only one to talk to for a little bit. And and I said, it's her and my 7-year-old daughter, and she just sort of stares at me a bit blankly. Why
are you talking so fast?
She's like, who's Djokovic? Oh, we'll start from the start. Anyway, okay. Look, this is crazy, right? Because it's just, what are you going to do? I mean, they can't really do much. They're a bit of a freedom of speech kind of party. They can't really do all that much to get rid of them, other than at least be vocal about the fact that they, don't encourage any anti-vax sentiment at all, which is what he's done. But it's still, I don't know. What would you suggest they do? What would you want? Fire them straight away?
No, not at all. I would censure them. So basically say, if this is your view, don't say it out loud. Simple as that. Like you may recall,
like you do with me before the show.
Don't talk about that. You might recall when we were doing the negotiations around net zero by 2050.
Yes, I love that.
And the Nationals were essentially holding the government to the government's feet to the fire, and essentially saying this is our list of demands. And we know that they definitely received a number of those, or definitely completed some of those demands. They got an extra member on the bench in the cabinet, rather. They got a number of promises for funding for rail projects, particularly the one up in Gladstone, and a number of other promises as well. Why didn't the government make that part of their conversation? Hey, this conversation is about net zero by 2050. But we also need to acknowledge that the next few months, strategically, nationally, we need to be all in lockstep around the need to vaccinate. So if you've got thoughts and feelings about vaccination, that's great. Don't talk about them.
I tend to agree with you. I think I'd rather know what the politicians think as well. I suppose from a party line perspective, though, this is the idea of towing the party line, isn't there? That, this is the party's policy, and you're either with us or you will be silenced or you will be booted out of the party because it's just not right, and it's completely and utterly detrimental to the good order of Australia, as we found out this week. And I mean, look, on the one hand, I want them to be vocal about it because I want to know what they're actually thinking, and on the other hand, you want them to be united. If they can all unite around all these other sort of frivolous, topics, why can't they? There's no, all the pork barreling that was going on, and all the, everything that was happening in the New South Wales Liberal Party, all that sort of stuff. They're all quite united around that,
But I suppose, and this is the thing, right? They're questions of perception. They're questions of who put money into this and who knew about it, right? Whereas this is a question about science. Like, it's not, no national MP, I can't think of any who are a GP, let alone an epidemiologist or an immunologist. No Nationals MP or senator is qualified to make any determinations on whether a vaccine is appropriate for any individual, let alone a population. And nor are they qualified to talk about ivermectin or the use of bleach or the use of whatever medicine. They are completely unqualified to talk on this thing. However, because they are high profile, not necessarily on a national stage, but we're talking about regional communities. I know my local member personally. I know my local senator personally. Actually, I don't know the senator personally, but I know the local member.
You follow him on Facebook, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but I know my local member personally. I've shaken his hand, pre-COVID. I've had conversations with him. I've had a beer with him. I've been to a barbecue with him. And the nature of these rural areas is that you do know them and you do have conversations on controversial topics. And it's important that that people who do have high profiles, again, not necessarily on a national stage, but where it actually matters, like Scenic Rim has an 80% vaccination rate, and it ain't ever going higher than that, I guarantee you. Regardless of mandates, it's never, Scenic Rim, sorry, is my council, my local council. It's never going higher because we have anti-vaxxers in our area. And if you add local politicians, one of my local politicians is a very prominent person and is an anti-vaxxer. When you give people who have power a stage, or when those people already have a stage, their opinions will absolutely prejudice other people, and they are simply unqualified to make those points.
Yeah.
Having an opinion about vaccines is like having an opinion on gravity. It literally doesn't matter. It's not a real thing. Your opinion on gravity is, unless your opinion on gravity is that, physicists know it better than I do, then your opinion is invalid. It means nothing.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. And let's hope that they get that. Let's hope that they get that sorted. One of the ways in which we've dealt with it this week, Jake, is to deport Novack Djokovic. This is not a sentence I ever thought I would say, but this week, Australia deported Novack Djokovic from its soil. And he landed back in Serbia, this morning our time, and to a hero's welcome, because he is a hero over there. His dad runs a cafe or a restaurant or something named after him. He's got murals all over the place. They're not the happiest of nations. They haven't had much reason to celebrate over the last few years. Novack Djokovic gives them that reason. There's no way, a majority of them were going to turn against him. But anyway, we did respond, Jake. We did actually. It sort of felt like we really wanted him out. I didn't think we did want him out, but apparently we did. Talk us through a little bit about what happened this week with Novack Djokovic and why he is not playing in the Australian Open.
This was such an absolute mess. I'm going to state my opinion up front that this whole thing was a distraction.
Yeah, right.
It was.
Yeah, from rats.
From rats. It's just so messy.
Millions of rats in, one rat out, hey?
Well, exactly. So he was originally granted a visa with an exemption for vaccination because, according to Djokovic, he got COVID in December of last year. His proof of getting COVID last year was that he was pictured standing with and hugging a group of kids who were, just pictured with some fans, essentially, which is great because either they had COVID and spread it to him or he had COVID and spread it to them. So why not? Let's take a photo and show everyone that you gave COVID to.
Yeah.
But that was his evidence of a previous COVID infection. And it was held to be a reasonably spurious claim because essentially when he arrived on our shores and we tested the claim that he had previously had COVID infection that he'd recovered from, that was rejected. And essentially the original premise that you can come into Australia reasonably freely now as long as you are double vaccinated with a TGA recognised vaccine, that came into play. So he had his visa cancelled. He was locked up in detention, and that was pending a federal court appearance, federal immigration court appearance, which there was a short-term injunction for. We thought, the court is going to rule in his favour, and it did. And so it eventually held in or found in his favour. And then the federal government decided, bugger that. The polling suggests that Australians are suitably distracted by this. So we're going to jump on that bandwagon and we are going to kick him out of Australia. And essentially their words were, it's in the public interest. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that the cancellation of Djokovic's visa was in the public interest. So after he had essentially been, the visa had been approved by the court, the Prime Minister and the Immigration Minister said, no, sorry. That was later appealed and he failed, or rather that appeal failed, and he was sent packing, I believe, on Sunday evening.
Yeah, it's all happened very, very quickly.
It did.
I'd want to. I want to agree with you that it's a distraction. I can't. I'm not that cynical. I think that it is. I think that it was the right thing to do. I think that he, particularly in Serbia, he's actually quite an anti-vaxxer, sort of messiah in that regard. And I think that he has the potential to fire up a few people down here as well, and particularly in Victoria, where there's already that sentiment bubbling underneath.
Yep.
I think they did the right thing. I think it's, look, we don't know what sort of backlash is going to occur from it. If the French didn't get too cranky with us about the whole submarine thing, maybe we can maybe we can skip. Maybe the Serbians won't get too cranky with us about this either. But just in terms of what are the actual sort of negative outcomes of it, maybe they're just a bit verbally cranky with us, which is fair enough. That was all going to happen. I think but I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was a smart decision, and it sends a very strong message.
I would agree with you if it was done preemptively. So I would agree with you if the original visa had never been granted.
Right.
But because the visa was granted, and because it went through a legal stoush, and essentially that legal stoush found that the visa could be approved, and then the Prime Minister and Immigration Minister decided at the end of it, that, hey, now it's public interest. But it wasn't public interest when he originally applied.
Yeah.
It's only public interest once we've gone through this protracted legal process. So had they originally never granted it, then I would completely agree with you. I wouldn't take the cynic's view, and I would agree that they were taking a hardline stance where for vaccination, vaccination is important, and moreover, it's important to Australia to ensure that, we remain safe and healthy and well. That would have been a great ruling. Djokovic probably would have still appealed, but he wouldn't have gotten on a plane and spent a week and a half in and out of court.
Yeah. Okay.
This was just so messy, protracted. And it's a waste of taxpayer expense. Even though Djokovic effectively has to pay for the legal expenses incurred by the government, it's just so messy. Don't give the guy a visa in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose that's a big part of it. And just to be clear as well, it says using discretionary powers under the Migration Act, Mr. Hawke needed only to be satisfied that Djokovic's presence in Australia may be or would or might be, it's like the beginning of a show, a risk to the health, safety or good order of the Australian community. The minister argued the Serbian was a talisman of anti-vaccination sentiment and could encourage Australians to breach public health restrictions, forego their booster shots, and even engage in civil unrest.
Yeah. So don't give them a platform at all. Just don't.
Yeah,
we don't allow the visa like they did. This is the thing, right?
Well, maybe they were trying. Maybe they were trying not to allow the visa, and that was just one avenue. And then when that avenue failed, they just thought, well, let's try another avenue. You know what I mean? Like they knew they didn't want him here. I mean, like I think the other thing is too. I don't like the idea that, I don't like this game of pretending like we don't know that Novack Djokovic is not an anti-vax spokesperson. Yes. You know what I mean? And so if we know that, then stuff him.
Well, the thing is, so his fellow tennis players don't like him. They
haven't really stuck up for him, have they?
No, they haven't. Not only haven't they, I think that sentence made sense, but not only have they not, stood up for him, but they've been quite clear that,
get vaccinated.
All
you
you
can
have
play
to do
tennis.
Is get vaccinated. Anyway, I've heard some great jokes. He's Novack Djokovic.
Novack
Djokovic.
Yeah.
First tennis player to be taken out by 2 shots.
Yes, good one.
That's it.
I got. Well, That's good. It's much better than what I had, which was nothing. So, yeah, tennis star Rafael Nadal has said that decisions have consequences, and while he respects his close rival Novack Djokovic, those in the public eye need to be responsible. In an interview with CNN on Saturday, the 35-year-old, that doesn't make me feel bad at all, who is in Melbourne ahead of next week's Australian Open, appeared to express frustration at how Novack Djokovic's back-and-forth visa saga has overshadowed the tournament, describing it as a circus. I'm more than happy to keep talking about it because we don't talk about tennis anyway, so on the show.
We always talk about tennis.
This is great.
It's one of the sports that we haven't got. Can you believe Sam Stosur is back?
Yes.
Sam Stosur.
Yes,
She hasn't played for some time, but she is back. She's in fine form. She's smashing aces all the way to the bank.
I don't pay any attention to anyone else other than Ash Barty these days, Jake. Yep. That's all I do.
I get it.
You know what I mean?
I do.
You just
I
put.
do.
I just put every time Ash Barty plays, I just put $1,000 down on Sportsbet.
Yep.
For her to win. Done. I've pretty
Ash
well
Barty,
retired.
more like Smash Barty, am I right?
I've pretty well retired. But yes, you let the games begin, and they must go on, and all that sorts of stuff. So good luck to the players, and good luck to Victoria for the event of the year, which is the Australian Open. Huge.
There is one final thing that I did want to say on this one that I should have said earlier. But Labor immigration spokesperson Christina Keneally said Djokovic should not have been granted a visa to travel to Australia in the first place.
Yeah, but they did try that.
But they didn't, because he got on a plane and he came. And it's not the first time that this has happened. There are political people, Geert Wilders,
oh yes,
Eminem. You may recall Eminem.
Mum spaghetti Eminem.
There are these exactly. There are these people who, the government of the day decide are undesirables. And I'm certainly not saying that Geert Wilders is not undesirable. He certainly is. But, there are these people that the government of the day decide are undesirables for whatever reason.
Mm.
And they simply don't give them a visa. It's really as simple as that. They have that discretionary power. And if people have made the argument that there's just too much going on in the immigration. No, I'm sorry. When you've got high profile people and you've got a major international event occurring in your country, you assign people to get those people through or to specifically block them. Like it's one of those things. This just seems like that. That's why I said this seems like a distraction. They could have stopped it right at the beginning. They could have said right at the beginning, we've not allowed it. He's an anti-vaxxer. He's going to spread this anti-vax sentiment, et cetera, No, gates closed to you.
Yeah, all right.
Not for you.
Well, we'll see how it pans out. Now, apparently, I don't know the details of it, but apparently, from what I've read, he faces a 3-year ban of Australia now, but apparently they'll rush that through. That was the other thing, right? He was in a detention centre with other people who can't afford an army of lawyers, to have their case heard. He had his case heard, the day after he was put into that hotel. It's not like, I think the other thing, that the sort of undercurrent here is that it highlighted, what's actually happening in those hotels, and the fact that there are people just locked up in there and that sort of thing. But anyway, they have different stories and have come here in different ways and all that sort of stuff too. So anyway, that's it's all very exciting.
It is.
And
sorry, I got so much to talk about.
Well, we're already 40 minutes in, Jake, so we don't have to go for too long on this. But let's start chatting about the fact that South Australia has just run on 100% renewables for a week straight. That's amazing.
It is.
And the lights stayed on the whole time for all 5 of them.
They did. No, the lights and the air conditioners. Which,
wow.
Anybody living in South Australia knows that they definitely need.
Does it get really hot down there? Does it?
It gets quite warm. Very dry heat unless you're along the coastline. But yeah, it's a hot place. They have Coober Pedy, which is one of Australia's hottest places. They build all of their houses underground. Famously,
all of the houses in Coober Pedy are underground.
Many of the houses are built into the land. It's one of the reasons they're known. Apart from the opals that they dig up, they also have they build a lot of their houses underground.
Look, cool. I'm a terrible person. I've never been to South Australia, but it's not. It's. I'll just blame the pandemic. I just couldn't make it down there in time.
I think we've had this conversation before, Greg, but one of the greatest things that I've ever found about South Australia is leaving it. The airport is particularly.
So you agree? You agree with the Victorian Premier about why would you go there?
The airport has been described as adequate.
It's the airport's the number one thing on TripAdvisor.
it sure is. Yeah, no, it is actually quite a lovely place. But
okay, carry on.
Yeah, so for 6.5 days. So I said it a week straight, but yeah, it's 6.5 days. From December 29 onwards, the state essentially sourced 100% on average of their electricity from renewable power. And of course, South Australia, recipient of the world's largest battery, or a number of batteries supplied by Elon Musk's Tesla company. But yeah, essentially, over the 6.5 identified days, the state produced an average of 101% of the energy it needed from wind, rooftop solar, and solar farms, with just a fraction of the energy the state was using being drawn from gas in order to keep the grid stable, particularly during peak times.
That's amazing.
At times during the period, slightly less renewable energy was available, and at other times renewable capacity was higher than needed, of course, and that gets balanced out through that good old massive battery. So Bruce Mountain, what a great name, Bruce Mountain, the director of the Victoria Energy Policy Centre, said that he believed that aside from some very small island grids such as those in Hawaii and Tasmania, very small, it was likely that South Australia's 6-day run on renewables was a record for a grid supporting an advanced economy.
Ah,
Who knew that South Australia was an advanced economy?
Well, it's got to be. It's got to be pretty good. Approximately 90% of Tasmania get their electricity generated from renewable sources.
Yeah,
so that's big.
Hydroelectric dam.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's a big dam. People go up and they say, "Damn, that's a dam."
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Well, Jake, you'll be happy to know. 60% of Coober Pedi's 3,500 locals live underground.
Yeah.
I can't.
Mole people.
They're like the mole people. About 100 years ago, a teenager discovered a piece of opal in the area. From there, miners flocked to the region, and soon enough, the town of Coober Pedy, the world's largest source of opals, was born. Right. Okay.
I don't tell lies on this podcast.
No, I just didn't. I feel like this is something I should know about Australia, that 60% of Coober Pedy live underground.
Maybe we need to make this a regular segment, Greg. Discovering Australia, like we can look at it.
Well, I think we do. I think we just do it through the politics. I think I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. I don't want to. Goodness me. I don't know if you've got a town that you want us to talk about. Sure, why not? Yeah, just send it through.
Next up, Lightning Ridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just give us a reason to talk about.
Give us a postcode.
Rural New South Wales.
Yeah, we'll review it. Okay, anyway, it's fascinating. In a place where temperatures are known to climb to 53 degrees Celsius in the summer, cleaner sources of energy provide welcome relief from the smoke and heat of the diesel fuel formerly used to power the town. This is great. It's really selling it, isn't it? At the centre of the opal mining industry for decades, Coober Pedy is now drawing new residents for its ability to self-sustain too. There you go.
Yeah.
From miners to...
So diesel generators for the self-sustainers.
No, that's right. They could live underground.
Well, yeah, they realised eventually that the reason that it was so hot was the sun, and that solar electricity is a thing. It was a pretty short realization circle, but they got there.
And if you're not investing in vitamin D supplements, I'd be jumping on that bandwagon for sure. If Coober Pedy's paving a way for the future of Australia. Anyway. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Highest incidence of rickets.
Well done, South Australia. We do share a border with South Australia here in New South Wales, so hopefully we can borrow some of that delicious energy one day. Dear me. Okay, let's talk about the upcoming election, Jake. We don't know when it is, who it is, why it is, or where it is, but I do know.
Yeah, or when, or why.
Yes.
Or how.
Or whom.
What.
Or whence.
Yep. Love it.
Wherefore art thou? But let's have a little chat about it. What the pressures that are going to be on for the upcoming election. So where are Australians' heads at? Are we still going to be talking about rats? Are we still going to be talking about the rat plague? Goodness me, that's been in the news a little bit. Apparently, it's heading our way. Are we going to be talking about La Nina? Is that Scott Morrison's fault?
Yeah, look. While Scott Morrison doesn't hold a hose, he does hold an East Atlantic current.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, he holds the phone to HARP, who control the weather.
HARP. Yeah, yes. I love it. So there is going to be a lot of pressures. I think if I'm reading the room correctly, a lot of those pressures are going to be around Scott Morrison's personal integrity, and whether he is a likable person still, or at least more likable than the alternative government, which is Anthony Albanese and Tanya Plibersek. And so it is. I think that is going to be one of the most, the most prominent questions that most Australians, at least swing voting Australians, are likely to ask themselves. I think the fact that, Morrison and the federal government did reasonably well during the first year of the pandemic. Gosh, wow. We're into year 3, aren't we now? The first year of the pandemic, where, he locked down quickly. He shut international borders quickly. He instituted JobKeeper. He tried to get things moving reasonably quickly, and tried to ensure that people were still attached to their employers.
Yes.
So that we didn't have a massive influx of unemployed people, even though invariably we did anyway. It just wasn't as bad. Year 2 was vaccination. It was immigration back to Australia. And arguably, as the record will show, there were not enough vaccines purchased of the, essentially our Prime Minister and Health Minister and other negotiators put all of their eggs in the AstraZeneca basket. And that turned out to be something that from a public relations perspective,
it's a schmozzle.
He didn't even back. Exactly. Even though it was, evidence shows that it's, one of the more effective vaccines when it comes to Omicron, and certainly Delta as well, and confers a longer immunity. It seems that the public relations associated with the very rare risk of blood clots essentially meant that the putting all of the eggs in that one basket was not the appropriate thing to do. That was with commentary.
That was pre-Omicron times, though. That was pre-Delta times. Once we had Delta, many people changed their tune. Many of the commentators I was watching on BBC News changed their tune. Many of the health ministers changed their tune. The chief health officers changed their tune. Once Delta hit the ground, they started saying, right, you just go and get
whatever vaccine you can get.
Whatever you want. Yes, that's right. Because up until then, even your chief health minister, what was her, Jeanette Young?
Jeanette Young, yeah.
She was saying, yeah. So yeah, that's right. She was saying, I don't want anyone to die of AstraZeneca who's not going to die of COVID-19. So don't worry about it. Don't take AstraZeneca. And then as soon as Delta hit, she changed her tune.
Well, no, she pretty well kept that tune the whole way through, because the reality was that Queensland essentially kept COVID out until the borders opened. Until that New South Wales and Victorian border, the border with New South Wales, which enabled people from Victoria to come up, was opened to double vaccinated New South Welsh and Victorians. We had entirely kept COVID out. So once that border opened, so did the COVID floods.
All right, cool. And I just want to touch base on something else here that I saw in the news this morning, which is relevant to the pressures of the election. The latest, I'm reading an article by Mike Head. He said the latest corporate media poll, a Resolve survey published in 9 media outlets today, gives another pale and distorted insight into the political disaffection. It shows that the primary vote Support for Morrison's government plunged from 39 to 34% from November to January, pulling it below support for the opposition Labour Party for the first time in recent years. Nonetheless, Labour's rating rose only from 32 to 35%, barely above the near record low of 33%. But that just sets some context around that. That 33% had it losing the last federal election in 2019.
Yeah, and part of this, and I dare say that Morrison is going to be liking those polls because Morrison loves to be the underdog.
Yeah.
And in fact, he fights extraordinarily well as the underdog. He did extraordinarily well in the last election, essentially through feeding misinformation on Labor's tax policy, around the franking credits, around so-called death taxes, which didn't exist, around their energy guarantee, carbon, their carbon target, and a number of other things. And they were Morrison and the Liberal government, Liberal National government, were extraordinarily successful in that underdog position. And I dare say that's going to carry through this one. I dare say that Morrison is going to be absolutely wanting that underdog position because for him, it is definitely a position of strength for whatever reason. But there is, there's other things. I think, the things that the Liberal Party are going to be spruiking in the lead up to the government, in the lead up to the election, is definitely the economy. The economy is strong for because we were able to get through the pandemic reasonably quickly and move to a recovery phase. With that said, it doesn't take too much to scratch sort of a little bit of the veneer away, because if you recall, prior to the pandemic coming to Australia and there being an economic downturn, interest rates were as low as they could possibly get. They were in the emergency territory. The RBA was saying, "Hey, you need to spend more, government. You need to spend more so that we can stimulate a little bit of inflation and stabilise things, because we are in the territory where we're not able to really do." So the economy was tanking well before COVID came in, the current government, even though we're under the helm of a different person, has been in power for over 10 years now. So it's it's one of those things that if you're going to claim the economy as something that people would elect you for, you should show a record of you being good with it. And I'm not sure that they could. The environment and carbon will be things. So
yeah, that'll be huge.
The Liberal Party has, I think it's 25% by 2030, 35% by 2030, and net zero by 2050. The Labor Party has 47% by 2030, and that same 2050 target. I think there's some other interim targets that the Labor Party have spoken about. Essentially, Labor has been showing that they are willing to go further, and they have been completely backed by the Business Council of Australia, who has in the past been vociferously against Labor for their harder targets. So it's quite interesting. Essentially the private sector is backing Labor's carbon target. What else? We got international relations. We got China. We got AUKUS. That's going to be fun. But I do genuinely think, the things that are going to weigh down Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party in general is going to be Scott Morrison's integrity in general. Do we trust him? I'm not confident that the Australian populace trusts Scott Morrison, and whether that translates into votes for Labor, I'm really not sure. I think it actually translates into votes for potentially independents, but more likely minor parties and conservative minor parties. One Nation, whatever Palmer's new one is called, United Australia. I think that's what it translates into. But it would be great if it was more of a level playing field with, sane thinking people. But that's fine.
That's politics for you in Australia, particularly. I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that people are going to be, they're going to carry with them this idea that is Scott Morrison the one we want to? Maybe he got us through the pandemic. Is him and his party the one that we want to lead the way into the type of life we want to live in a post-pandemic world? We want it to be a little more, I don't know, enlightened's not the right word. I suppose it's more, about the women's rights situations, about Indigenous rights situations, about those sorts of things. Those sorts of, will the social current be strong enough to push people to vote him out, so that those topics will be, forefront in the next few years, rather than the economy is doing well, so we should all be happy and all that sort of stuff. So I think you're on the right track there with those sorts of comments. Unfortunately, Anthony Albanese doesn't have a great presence about him either, but that doesn't seem to matter, because we know that Scott Morrison got voted in for, without having that sort of, that Barack Obama-esque charisma. So the charisma side of things doesn't really matter. What will matter is that, businesses are actually going to be struggling. Tourism is going to be struggling. A change during such turmoil would be, I think, surprising. I think it would be surprising if Australians as a whole wanted to change the trajectory, as we do come out of this pandemic, because as we've seen, if everyone's kind of as guilty as what I am, I sort of thought, it would last a year or so, and now it's 2 years, and we're still seeing huge ramifications from it. And so I keep thinking to myself, maybe this goes on for 4 years. A pandemic goes on for 4 years before you start sitting around at the pub going, "Oh, remember the pandemic?" Maybe it goes on for 5 years. Who knows? And so to change, this whole pandemic, the whole disaster goes on for years to come. So to change now, I think, would be a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I think that's a decent prediction. Where it maybe breaks down is that question around whether change during uncertainty. I agree. People are reluctant to change during uncertainty, but the question that voters will likely be asking themselves is this person responsible for the uncertainty?
Ooh,
I think
blew my mind.
I think that I think these are the lines that both sides of politics are going to, or all of the sides of politics are going to be pushing. I think the Liberal Party, the National Party are going to be pushing hard for, hey, we are the stable guys. We kept the economy solid. We did JobKeeper. We did other programs, etc. But I think the Labor Party. And if they go hard on this, maybe it will backfire. But I think that they will likely say, look, you can't trust this guy. This guy, this is the guy that said, open up your borders. We can't live in caves anymore. Well, look, everyone's got COVID now.
Yeah, look at Cooper Petey.
they're living in caves. Underground.
They're living in caves.
Exactly. They're living in caves, and they're out at the pub. They're out at the pub right now, drinking with each other, saying, "How about that pandemic?"
Dear, that is so funny.
But it is one of those things that I genuinely think that is going to be the tactic or the strategy that the Labor Party will use. It'll be, you can't trust this guy. This guy is the guy that said, open up the borders, but not supply the tests required in order to, or not guarantee supply of the tests required in order to ensure that people are happy, healthy, and living through the pandemic.
Yeah.
You can't live with a pandemic if you don't have the tools that you need in order to live safely through that pandemic.
That's a very good point, Jake, and one that we'll stay on top of it. It'll be absolutely fascinating to be able to spend the year having a look at politics, having a look at how the election plays out, when it's announced, all that sort of stuff. So please stay tuned to the Pouch the Podcast. Keep us in your subscription feed. Listen to us when we pop up, and that'd be fantastic. And eat those Wheat Bix. Is that what you said?
Yeah, eat Wheat Bix. Yeah, you were giving all sorts of recommendations. I just think that like Wheat Bix are really good for bowel health. And
are they?
Greg, I don't know about you. Yeah. Greg, I'm of that age.
You say yes like you speak from experience. Like every morning, you're just like, "Yep." If I don't have my Wheat Bix.
Yeah. I'm of that age, Greg, where bowel health is really important. So look, if you're giving recommendations, I'm going to give one to each Wheat Bix.
Okay. Yeah, take it on board. Now, something that came through on my newsfeed while we were on air, Jake. More than 100,000 health staff and up to 57,000 nurses from the private health system will be available to the public sector in Omicron-affected areas around Australia. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt said the government is activating the private hospitals agreement. Activate the private hospitals agreement, which was established in early 2020. The agreement was designed to support state hospital systems at any time where they may be under significant pressure. So there you go. There's something to stick in your Wheat Bix.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword though, Greg, because it means that if you had an elective surgery planned at a private hospital,
hasta la vista. Yes. Well,
we'll see you in
no
July.
Nose jobs for me, Jake.
No. Well, I was getting a double nose job.
Not this. You were getting 2 noses. Very good.
And I was getting my ears done.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You can find us all on the socials, all that sort of stuff. I
don't remember how we ended.
There's a Patreon or something like that. We ended it with you singing the outro song, Jake. So I'll leave you with that. You know what? I'm not even going to play the outro song on this one. I'm not even going to put it on there. That's it. That's what you get. All right. We'll see you in the next episode of the Pouch the Podcast. And thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.